There is no way that this should be surprising. Check this out, and I'll be right back.
We're here today because an unspeakable tragedy has unfolded in Minnesota. My good friend and colleague, Speaker Melissa Hortman, and her husband Mark were shot and killed early this morning in what appears to be a politically motivated assassination. Our state lost a great leader, and I lost a dearest of friends. Speaker Hortman was someone who served the people of Minnesota with grace, compassion, humor, and a sense of service. She was a formidable public servant, a fixture and a giant in Minnesota. My prayers also go out to State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Avett, who were each shot multiple times. The Hoffmans are out of surgery at this time and receiving care, and we are cautiously optimistic they will survive this assassination attempt. This was an act of targeted political violence.
What you just heard is a press conference that Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, put on in the aftermath of the domestic terrorist action and a politically motivated assassination that resulted in the death of at least one death that we know of so far of an elected official, an elected Democrat in Minnesota. We could have all predicted that this was going to happen. After all, this is a regime that has enabled massed, unidentified people to roam the streets and kidnap people in broad daylight and shove them into vans and other vehicles, never to be seen or heard from again. And when you think about what happened in the Minnesota shooting incident, what did we see? We saw somebody impersonating a police officer and using the psychological size of the badge and the uniform as a way to get access and commit carnage. And what makes this even worse is that the administration for months knew things like this were a possibility. Homeland Security, through a leaked memo, had evidence that these sort of incidents, these sort of attacks on soft targets were going to be a high likelihood of occurring. And as far as we know, they never disclosed this to people who might be interested in having that knowledge. So when you look at what happened in Minnesota and the instance of this targeted assassination by a Trump-supporting white Christian nationalist, the blood on this incident falls directly on the hands of the Trump regime. And you've already seen the efforts of the regime and regime mouthpieces to make the case that this was some sort of Democrat. Let's look at the optics of this scenario. This was a person who had a manifesto in their car. They had a list of 70 Democrats that they wanted to take out. They had a list of abortion facilities and abortion care providers that they wanted to take out. This was a known member of a far-right Christian cult, the New Apostolic Reformation movement, which has one of its stated goals as to take over all the 7 major pillars of society and use legislation as a mechanism to bring forward a Christian nationalist state. That is what the shooter believed in. And the regime mouthpieces would have you believe that this was somebody that was a Democrat that went out shooting Democrats. And we know historically that when it comes to these sorts of crime, it's more often than not committed by Republican allies. This is not new. After all, when we think about what the administration has regularly been doing, they've been calling the press the enemy of the state. They've been calling the people the enemy of the regime. They've been calling Democrats demons and predators and groomers and everything else that you can think of. They've been on the record repeatedly dehumanizing anyone that they consider their political enemies. They've been on camera taking down senators, congressmen, putting them in cuffs, arresting people who are peacefully protesting, using their allies that are in white nationalist groups embedded within police forces to turn their sights onto peaceful protesters in order to agitate some sort of violent response. Whenever you see this regime point the finger at the opposition being violent or the opposition being anything, you can be sure that this is an effort to project onto their political opponents what they are actually trying to do. When you look at Minnesota as an isolated event, that is the outcome of the environment that this regime has created. You have this regime that is actively doing whatever they can to ethnically cleanse the U.S. of anyone who is brown or black and ship them off to foreign gulags. And they act surprised when masked, unidentified people start showing up and trying to commit crimes under the guise of it being official business. That is the environment that this regime has created. There's been a pattern of behavior from his first administration where Trump has been signaling any and every domestic terrorist organization in the US to exact the retribution that he feels is necessary. We saw it in Charlottesville and we saw it across his entire first term. And then we saw it in his campaign where various Republicans were motivated to take matters into their own hands and exact whatever sort of retribution they felt was necessary. His two quote unquote assassination attempts were committed by Republicans. And this particular incident in Minnesota was also committed by a Trump supporting Republican. This is somebody who fits the profile of what is typical when it comes to political violence in the US. He's another white Christian nationalist and Trump supporter who has a lack of impulse control and was bent on exacting his revenge. We've seen this before. The fact of the matter is that the Republican Party and MAGA in particular is the party of hate. They are the party of retribution and they are a party of white supremacy. And they are showing their lack of impulse control over and over again. And this is all supported and emboldened by the actions and the words of the regime itself and the regime proxies. Let's keep in mind that red states all across the country have mobilized National Guard troops in the expectation that there's going to be violence. When we've actually seen violence occur, it's been a result of escalation by police forces and National Guard troops and militarized police forces across the country. In fact, in the No King's Day protests in LA, we had on the ground reporting that indicated that all of the protests were massively peaceful until the LAPD decided to lob tear gas and flashbangs into the crowd to create chaos. And this has been repeated in states like Texas and in Florida. In fact, in Florida, we hear this from this sheriff.
If you resist lawful orders, you're going to jail. Let me be very clear about that. If you block an intersection or a roadway in Brevard County, you are going to jail. If you flee arrest, you're going to go to jail tired, because we are going to run you down and put you in jail. If you try to mob rule a car in Brevard County, gathering around it, refusing to let the driver leave, in our county, you're most likely going to get run over and dragged across the street. If you spit on us, you're going to the hospital and in jail. If you hit one of us, you're going to the hospital and jail, and most likely get bitten by one of our big, beautiful dogs that we have here. If you throw a brick, a firebomb, or point a gun at one of our deputies, we will be notifying your family where to collect your remains at, because we will kill you graveyard dead.
That's right. The sheriff of Brevard County is giving license and giving the green light for people who don't like the message that the protesters are giving to commit vehicular manslaughter. That sheriff should resign. Now, are we really surprised that when a sheriff openly gives permission and green light for various citizens to be run over, that these things don't start happening? Check this out from Aaron Parnas.
A man drove into a crowd intentionally in Culpeper, Virginia at a No King's Day protest, aiming likely to harm those protesting. One person has been injured, according to Fox 5 DC. Here's what we know right now, according to Fox 5. Police say Joseph R. Cheklik of Culpeper intentionally accelerated into a crowd of protesters near the James Madison Highway this afternoon. He struck at least one person with his vehicle. He has been charged with reckless driving and is currently being held without bond at the Culpeper County Jail.
This is the common thought process across MAGA circles everywhere. They see zero issues with killing their fellow citizens, and this is the same group that has been screaming for a civil war for the better part of the last 10 years. But again and again, what happens? What happens is that Democrats and liberals and independents show extreme restraint, while we see over and over again the Republican Party and MAGA in general unable to control their impulses. It is becoming very clear that the Republican Party is a proxy for every white nationalist terrorist group in the US. There's a reason why they have earned the nickname Al Qaeda or Vanilla ISIS, because that is what this group is. This group is not a political party. MAGA is not a political party. They are by and large domestic terrorists bent on bringing forward their Christian white nationalist utopia. Ultimately, what you have to think about is when you see all of this happening, these are the hallmarks of a failing ideology. They can't win in the arena of ideas, so they have to resort to violence. And that's why you see this happening over and over again. There's a reason why this regime has been paying off traitors like the family of Ashley Babbitt. There's a reason why this regime pardoned all of the J6 traitors and insurrectionists, because they need their support in the streets to create chaos and to help them build the narrative that the left wing and anyone that is non-MAGA is prone to violence. What have you seen immediately in the aftermath of the Minnesota assassinations? You've seen right wingers race without evidence to say that the attacker was a Democrat, and it defies logic. Does that really make sense? It doesn't. But then again, the right wing and MAGA has never relied on operating in reality to advance their goals. And don't be surprised if we see in the upcoming weeks and months a narrative start to emerge that these incidents are actually deep state or Democrat false flag operations designed to make it look like it's the Republicans and MAGA that are the bad guys. We all remember the narrative around J6. It was a deep state plot that Nancy Pelosi pushed forward. That is what we're going to hear.